Welcome to Infrastructure with UX on the team. And I am not a UX designer, I am a developer. So today I'm going to take you through why we mean a UX designer has a perfect, legitimate spot on an infrastructure-heavy team. And when I say infrastructure, I mean networking, databases, backup, whatever you have. We're going to go through two things: how to treat infrastructure as a product, and then we're going to look at how a UX designer then contributes to our team with their processes. So I come from Oslo, Oregon. We do digitalization and product development in Oslo, and we do a lot of we come up near to our end users. For example, me as a developer, once the emergency room in Oslo was going to get some new software, I was actually following people on the emergency room to see what are their actual needs before we even started to develop there. So we started out in 2017 as a project. We became a department in 2020. We were about 10 teams or so. And right now we're on the fast track of actually becoming the digitalization department 1st of January, where we take another IT department and merge together with us in order to actually bring what we have further into the municipality. So I come from the internal platform team on the user developer experience group. So we're 4 developers, 1 tech lead and 1 UX designer. Right now she's also acting product manager, but from day one we always had a 100% UX designer on this team. We also are connected with legal, so we can talk with those as well. Me as a developer, I worked for the past 20 years on everything from back end to front end and anything in between. But right now I'm heavy on the Terraform. I work with AWS organization, how to set up cloud, how to do it properly and securely, and talk to the teams about it. So one of the things I've learned over those years is if you start talking about something, you have to define the context and culture of where that word is used. If you take the word DevOps, for example, and you talk to 50 people, you have 50 different meanings of what DevOps actually is. So I'm going to go and define the context that we have. Our DevOps model is quite easy, but it's unique, quite unique in terms of other places. All of the teams have responsibility from day one until the application is actually shut down. This means they also have the responsibility for everything from infrastructure all the way up to the user interface. We on the platform team are not running anything on these teams' infrastructure. The team have their own infrastructure and they own it. This means they have to learn it. But infrastructure can be hard. Anyone that worked with Terraform knows that this can be very hard. So this is where the golden path comes in. So the golden path is something all of the teams have to start out with. It's a set of Terraform modules, GitHub Actions, it's CI/CD, OpenID Connect, and all of these things that we have created to say this is the golden path that you should do if you want to create an application in AWS. So it's a lot about putting things together in a good way that the team can quickly start using, so that they can focus on the application and not the infrastructure, and how do you connect all of these infrastructure components. So it ends up sort of like this. We have the AWS organization in the bottom. We tied it up there, and we have SCPs, and we ensure that people don't use something they shouldn't use. Then all of the teams have their own accounts. They have normally 2 accounts, and they have full admin access to it. So it means that they pull in the golden path, and they can set that up in about an hour or 2, and they have something running in their account. And then they can add or modify what the golden path is, and then they will have an application running there. So it sort of works like this. You have a lot of golden bricks in the golden path. So this team can take in 2 golden bricks, don't modify it, and use the default configuration in order to get the load balancer in ECS up and running. And they can then modify the VPC if they want to, and they can then add, for example, an API gateway in order to use their application, and all of this is based on the requirements that the application and the domain that they're working on. This means that they don't have to wait for us to work out the API gateway module before they start. So what we do then in the team is trying to help the organization with the things that matters the most. So how can we help the organization lower the cognitive load for all of the users? So as I said, networking, databases, GitHub Actions, authentication, Terraform, all of this is not something you want to release on 10 different teams because you will get a mess in the end. This means that we try to make the teams move in the same direction. We lower the cognitive load for the team, and we lower the cognitive load for the organization. So we help each other. So this is sort of like a guiding star that we have when we do all of our development. So how are we going to do this in a good way? And we figured out that you have to treat infrastructure as a product, where the product is Terraform, and our end users are developers internally in the department. So it's not a matter of, you can say that, we'll do a internal development platform and we'll get some Terraform and GitHub Actions up. That's not enough. You have to think about the ecosystem around all of that code if you want to succeed with this approach. One thing I've also learned, maybe the hard way, is you have to then start talking about the team dynamics. A lot of people say, we have cross-functional teams. You got to go beyond that and go to the next level and say you have to have cross-competency in the teams. If not, it will be just throwing things back and forth and nobody will understand what are we actually doing here. So UX must understand enough infrastructure. Our UX designer is actually getting into infrastructure and actually understanding what are we doing, what are the purpose of the Terraform code that we are providing. But this also means that me as a developer, I need to know enough about UX to see what the UX design field can contribute when I start writing Terraform code. And when we do this, you get a culture of curiosity. But you have to foster this curiosity in order for this to actually work. So you have to set out time enough so that everybody can learn and appreciate each other's fields for this to actually to work. So curiosity is a very good thing, because when this happens, we start to ask the right questions in the team. I did this with legal once. We were doing risiko assessment of AWS as a platform. Very enthusiastic theme, right? Because you got to sit down and you got to do risk assessment of AWS. And we had legal, and we were sitting there discussing, and we were not talking on the same level. So I took legal out, and we had 2 or 3 hours talking about the golden path and what that actually meant for the end user, which are our developers. When we came back and looked at the risk assessment again, legal started asking the right questions about what AWS and all of this infrastructure actually is. It meant that our UX designers suddenly started reading platform strategy. It meant that I started going out reading UX books and attended meetups with clear language because I saw how important this is if we're going to succeed in what we are delivering to our teams. And this is quite interesting. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a DORA report on AI, and there was a chapter on platform engineering. And it was 2 things that actually popped out when I read that. It says that until the user experience is addressed, the platform's value remains unrealized. And the other thing is that you have to embrace the mindset of the platform as a product and your developers as your customers. This is very important, and I like this because it says something about what you need to do to achieve success. So UX developers, we help each other to find the right tasks for Golden Path at the current time and current knowledge. So how do we find the current knowledge? Because this is a fast-moving area. Well, we put UX on the team. So how do we work in a day-to-day operations? Big surprise, there's nothing different here than any other UX process, actually. Remember now, I come from a background with Terraform and infrastructure, so UX is not my, I haven't never had any degree in it, but I've learned quite a bit about this in the past couple of years. We do breadboarding. We try to map out the conversation that we will have with infrastructure. We do user journeys. So how do we get a common understanding of the journey that our end users will have once they start pulling in these Terraform modules and setting up a database? So how is a user journey for a VPC, a network in AWS? It can get quite interesting when you start mapping it out like this. The documentation and onboarding was good talk earlier about this onboarding process, because documentation is one of the cornerstones as well when it comes to this, because we need to have a clear language. We use something called diataxis, a systematic approach to technical documentation. So we have setups, we have updates, we have guides. This also have to cover both people that are starting with Terraform and are brand new, but it should also then cover people that are experienced and just wants to know how to use it. So you have to have a tone of voice that will cover all of these different things. And the fun thing is that our UX designer is now actively on GitHub, writing documentation, commenting on PRs, and actually are involved in this process of writing our documentation. And then there's this interacting with the user. If you're ever a developer and you talk to another developer and say, yeah, I can do that, let me get back to you tomorrow. That can work, maybe, but you need to do interviews with the correct methodology in order to get the correct insight. If you don't do that, you will just get the answers maybe that you want, so that you can develop whatever you want to do in the next quarter. Then it's about observation. As I said, we have documentation, so we can say, all right, if there's a new developer on the team, let him go through the paces of setting up a new environment, and we'll sit silently and observe that developer doing this and figuring out the pain points. And believe me, even if we've had this for quite a while, there's always pain points, because suddenly somebody comes from a different organization and come into us, and we have a lot of assumptions about what things are, so that when they go to the documentation, they will get frustrated because it doesn't mean, and they don't understand what it means in the context that we are in. Testing, getting people early on and adapt the things that we are rolling out so that we can get the feedback from our users. And when we combine all of this also, this is something our UX designer is talking about, which she thinks is really fun when it comes to combining all of these methodologies, is mob programming. So basically we sit down with a team in a room. We did this with Datadog that we just rolled out. We can start, and then we can hand over the development to the team, and then we can have a discussion, and we can learn from each other, and we can see, do they achieve whatever we think they will achieve while sitting in the same room and having a dialogue about the code that we are presenting. It's very interesting, but it has to be a relaxed and comforting place where people can have a dialogue and talk about what's actually happening. We then do continuous dialogue. We have to communicate what we're doing. So the first thing is the super user forum. We have one person from each team, and all of those are dedicated and coming to these super user forums, where we can then talk about where are we now, what are our hypotheses at the current time, and where do we want to go in the near future when it comes to infrastructure in AWS. This is also a great place to have workplaces. The user journeys we print out and put up on the wall, and then we can split these up in 3 or 4 groups, and we can make them discuss these user journeys and say, what's missing? What do you think is redundant? Or maybe the most interesting thing is, here's a blank user journey, put up on the wall and say, how do you envision a perfect user journey for onboarding a JVM application to Datadog? And then see what comes back without us actually telling them what we think upfront. Then we have focus groups. Once we start doing something new, like the Datadog integration, we get these early adapters that are eager to actually start using this and wants to use it. And we gather 3, 4, 5 people in a room. We talk technical deep dive. We talk about expectations, how would they foresee how this will affect their applications. And then we do the loop with testing, observation, and developing quite quickly once we see how this focus group is doing. And in the end, we managed to say, just do this one flag on your application, rerun Terraform, and you will have automatic instrumentation of your JVM application into Datadog with 2 commands. And that basically means that they can start exploring all of these metrics in Datadog without much effort. Then there's the next thing, which I think had a hard time actually translating this. Kosekrok, the cozy corner. That was the closest thing I could figure out. Okay, so each of the teams then have a Kosekrok, cozy corner, where we get all of the team members, and then we have the platform team together. This is a place where it's casual, it's safe, it's low threshold. People can ask questions that I may not be comfortable talking about in the support channel. We can debug things with them. So this is a place where we can be close with the team and talk about infrastructure. And we see that the knowledge sharing over time as well is very good to have one of these places, because once the next person comes into the team, they can come in here and they can figure out, all right, we did this with ECS because of these requirements on the application, and we have to do it like this. The code is not wrong, it just has to be like this, and it's all in the Slack channel. So it's a good way of communicating code. We also have this about creating a community. Since all of the different teams have pretty much the same infrastructure as code repositories, and they use the same golden path as a base layer for their infrastructure, people in the organization starting answering and helping other people out with questions before we as a team even manage to get into Slack. So it's a matter of having the organization moving in the same way, but with the flexibility of expanding and doing what you need based on the application needs. Now we come to something interesting. Laws of UX. The laws of UX actually says best practices for building user interfaces. And these laws that I put up here is all about how do you reduce complexity? How do you reduce cognitive load once you want to look at code and figure out how it's working? Terraform is a user interface for us because that's what our end users are actually using. So we apply these laws to our Terraform code and our GitHub Actions, even though GitHub Actions with YAML is hard to get right when it comes to UX. So this comes down to communicating with code. So this is where the UX design principle comes down into Terraform, GitHub, and all of the other things that we are creating. So how do you create modules that are large enough but not too small so you have microstacks? How do you design input, output between different stacks so that you don't get this tangle of Terraform stacks that you will never be able to pull apart? Anyone that has done that will know what I'm talking about, because that's not fun at all. As I said, common ESS structure is a very good thing to do as well. So how does this translate to actual code? Well, this again with the law of common region to group things together. That's from the laws of UX. So here's the auto-scaling, and here's the environment configuration. And these are default configuration that we pull out. So we group them together, we have clear naming, And all of these then map to AWS console. So you can change anything here, and you can go to AWS console, and you can actually see the changes directly there. So it's a matter of getting people that are not used to AWS and cloud infrastructure to see, okay, if I do this, something happens over here, and it's a visual representation of the code. So it's easier to do, and it's easier to know that you should just do it here. This I could talk about probably for 2 hours, but I have 2 minutes. So how does this actually then translate in the teams? So the team then pull out and create 2 different environments. You have a dev and a prod environment here. These are the stack sizes, just to give you an idea. You have DNS, database, backup. These are 3 different stacks in Terraform. You work on those individually. Once you then go into the code, you can see that anything with GP, that's golden path, that comes from us. So this is code that the team has pulled in from our GitHub repo. So __, think about, as I said earlier, grouping things that stay together. __ is all of the configuration dependency versions. Those you want to keep for themselves. Then it's _GP, then you come into the actual implementation. So you have _GP ALB, which is the load balancer. So if you target the load balancer, you just go there. Think about how many things you can keep in your head at the same time. If all of these things was grouped in one file, you would have a hard time following this if you want to figure out where are the security groups and how are all of these things connected. So if you want to go to security groups, you can just go to the security groups file. And then we have patterns in terms of how these files communicate and load data across each file. Then there's the concept of override file. This is basically a Terraform thing that says if there's a file called _override, you can override whatever is in the main module. So we push a lot of defaults in GP config at the top, but then we don't hide or we don't make all of the configuration options inaccessible for the end users. So we don't have to expose all of the variables. So if you're an advanced user, you can go in and actually just create an override file and say, I know what I'm doing. I want to have an ECS that is this big, or I want to have these extra security layers in top of it. And then we distribute this with packages.yaml files. So try to do things as any other software update that your end user is used with. NPM update. We have a tool called OK, Oslo Kommune, when we just go OK package update. We distribute the same way. Don't try to innovate something where there's no need to innovate. And now we start to get into something really interesting, because once you get all of those override files and places where people have gone outside the golden path, it means that we haven't distributed a default package that they can use, or they need to modify it. And when enough people start doing that, you will see these gravel roads starting to appear in the GitHub repos for Terraform. And we can analyze this and see, all right, if 6 out of 10 teams have the same gravel road with overrides, okay, we should probably pull that into golden path because we've missed our abstraction level, or we've missed our default configuration. If all of the teams have an ECS task that needs, for example, 2 GB of RAM in production, and we default it to 1 GB, we should just bump that default up to 2 GB as a default, and nobody needs to override it. And then we can start looking at all of the override. This is where it gets fun for me, because I get to parse data. And we can actually see where are the overrides happening. And you can see in the app, in the load balancing and databases, there are a lot of overrides, so we can start focusing there. If we didn't have those data, we wouldn't know actually where to look. So we gather qualitative data, and we gather quantitative data, because when you talk to people, you get a lot of good answers, when we can then back it up and say, your code speaks the same problems as you speak about the same problem. So together, we can then figure out what are the current pain points that our users are having. And this, again, this helps us choosing the right task at the current moment and knowledge. So we always update our current knowledge with this. Does this mean we have a perfect platform? No, but we have quite happy users, which this feedback shows. In addition, we as a team can develop quite quickly because we have a pattern where we can, again, for example, with the Datadog setup, we know how these packages and templates work together, and we can distribute it quite easily, and we have a common way of setting up new things. We do have problems. There's this eternal discussion about stack sizes, eternal discussion about abstraction levels. How do you put things together? Because everybody has their own opinions about this. And then it's about communicating. Because if we do something because we mean that's a good thing for the organization. So if somebody comes and says, this abstraction layer is wrong, they're not wrong, but we have to communicate to them why we do it. So as a developer, I have learned so much from actually starting reading all of these UX and clear language books that would help me, and it translates down to Terraform code that initiates and runs infrastructure in AWS. So that's a quite interesting experience to have. So I can sum this up with this. We know the user's pain, and we can prioritize on solving these pain points as they go. So we can reiterate quite quickly and figure out what's the problem, what did we do wrong. And in terms of proof of concepts and early testing, we catch all of these things before the pain goes out to all of the different teams. Because if you worked with infrastructure, you know that infrastructure is a very slow train to change at times. It's not a matter of, hey, 10 teams go out, you just have to, kill your network and reinitiate it today because we have a patch. Things take a long time, so you have to communicate on why we are doing this. Yes, cognitive load. I think I can sum all of these slides up with. Reduce the cognitive load, not only for the team, but for the organization, so that people can swap and go from one team to the other team, and we have the knowledge sharing within the organization. So this is my UX designer on the team, and I would say get a UX designer on the team because the life of your end users will be so much better. Thank you.